When the Prophet brought the teaching of Islam, he brought a teaching of equality, where the rich and poor were now equal. Men and women had an equal status in society.
He was telling the world two things. One was how to treat daughters with respect and how to respect women in general. And also the fact that in times to come, he will be indebted to Fatima and her progeny for the propagation and survival of his divine message. The message of love, of equality, of justice, of peace, not a message of what Islam has now is interpreted to be.
At a very young age, she accomplished so much. In 18 years of life, we find that she leaves a legacy like none other. She is one woman who is the axis between both imamat and nabuwat.
To have someone like Fatima Zahra is a treasure. It's really something that, instead of having it only in books and words, and you should be like this, and you should aspire to be so, when you actually see a person becoming like that, it really encourages you and tells you that this is possible. It's possible to be generous like Fatima. It's possible to be wise like Fatima. It's possible to be firm in faith like Fatima.
O people, know that I am Fatima, and my father is Muhammad. I will say that repeatedly and continuously. I do not say what I am saying mistakenly, nor do I do what I do aimlessly. A messenger has come to you from among yourselves. So if you know him and you know who he is, you will see that he is my father, not the father of any of your women.
Holy Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, focused very much on informing the Muslims and the non-Muslims alike that Fatima and her husband and her children are the Ahlul Bayt. And on such an occasion, one man who came out from the desert areas approached the Prophet and he said, I'm wanting to join you and become a Muslim. What shall I do? The Prophet said, say, La ilaha illallah. And the man said the Shahada. Say, no, Muhammad Rasulullah. The man said, he taught him some very basic things and he said, okay, Rasulullah, do you require anything from me? Do you need payment? Shall I give you something because you taught me what to do? And the Prophet said, no, because Allah has revealed the verse to me saying, I do not ask from you any reward except that you love and care for my relatives. Now we are defining who the relatives are. And so the man said, which relatives? Your relatives, Ya Rasulullah, or my relatives? He said, no, my relatives. We, the family of the Prophet. And he said, who are they? And he pointed it to the house of Fatima and said, the people in there. And they were Ali and Fatima and al-Hasan and al-Husayn. And so this was also a marker, something quite clear and definite to say that we are describing the family of the Prophet. These are the individuals.
When the Christians of Najran came to Rasulullah in Medina, they disputed with him over Prophet Isa not being a prophet, rather being the son of Allah. Rasulullah responds and he says the similitude of Isa is that of Adam, that Allah said be and it be.
Rasulullah said the best way is to await, I will await divine command and let you know how to resolve this issue. God commanded Rasulullah to ask the Christians of Najran to enter into a mutual imprecation. That means cursing upon the one who is a liar.
فمن حاجك فيه من بعد ما جاءك من العلم فقل تعالوا ندع أبناءنا وأبناءكم ونساءنا ونساءكم وأنفسنا وأنفسكم ثم نبتهل فنجعل لعنة الله على الكاذبين.
The Prophet acted upon the divine revelation, which says that when they dispute with you concerning the ideology, then ask them to bring your men and we bring our men. You bring your souls and we bring our souls. You bring your women and we bring our women. And we settle this issue through mutual imprecation.
And so the Mubahila is set for the next day. During that night, we find that the bishop approaches a man called Aqib, and he says to Aqib, he goes to Aqib for some counsel on the matter. Aqib says to him, he is a prophet of God. He says, nobody has entered into a Mubahila with a prophet of God and not lost. If you wish for your religion to stay on the face of this earth, do not enter into this Mubahila with him. Find that the dawn of the next day come.
And the Bishop of Najran with his other Christian fellows arrived there. And they waited for the Rasulullah to come. While they were there, they said to themselves, look here, that the test of the piety and the genuine apostleship of the Prophet of Islam is this. If he comes with a huge army to meet us, then we know he's a false prophet. But if he comes to us with his very near ones, whose life he's prepared to risk, then he has to be a true prophet.
And in this gathering, we see that the Prophet took with him al-Hasan and al-Husayn, so he excluded everybody else that could be referred to as the sons or the children of the Prophet. He brought only these two. And Nisa'ana, he only brought Fatima al-Zahra. He could have brought his wives, he could have brought his aunt, Safiya, he could have brought lots of other relations from his family, and he brought only Fatima. Some people claim that there were other daughters alive at the time. He could have brought the other daughters with him. He brought only Fatima. And Anfusana, he brought himself and Ali ibn Abi Talib to represent himself. And we see that this limits the description of who is the same as the Prophet, Ali ibn Abi Talib. Who is the only woman capable of representing the Prophet, Fatima al-Zahra. Who is the only person capable of being the son of the Prophet, al-Hasan and al-Husayn.
When the Christian priests see this gathering of the Prophet with his family, the Prophet starts to prostrate. And one priest says to another, surely I see light coming from these faces, that if they were to prostrate, if they are to ask the gods for anything, that we will be destroyed. Stop him from prostrating. Stop him from asking Allah which one of us is right.
By Allah, if these people ask for the dislodging of a mountain to happen, it will happen. We should not enter into this Mubahila at all. Otherwise, a Christian will not remain on the face of this earth. And so we find that the bishop goes towards Rasulullah and says, we do not wish to partake in this Mubahila.
So the priest goes to Muhammad and says, surely we believe that you are the Prophet of Islam, and we do not want you to ask Allah that to show which one is right and which one is wrong, because it is said in our books that when we see faces like this, that we should not go against them, and surely they are the rightly guided and they are the purified.
And so Rasulullah invites them to the religion of Islam. He invites them to the religion of Islam and he says, no, we will follow our religion, you can follow yours. And so they enter into a peace treaty with one another.
What they offered was, they said, we will enter into an agreement with you that we will offer, because Najran had a steel industry, so we will offer to prepare breastplates for your soldiers. In return, you will ensure our security and that we are secure and not attacked by any enemy. And therefore an agreement was entered into where the Christians of Najran came under the protection of the Prophet, and they remained so as long as he was alive.
The Prophet was preparing for the final stages of his life gradually, without wanting to panic people and without wanting to make people afraid of the future. He set in motion a series of plans to try to ensure a smooth succession. One of these began with Hajjat al-Wada, which was the farewell or the final Hajj.
In the 10th year of Hijrah, the Prophet went on the final farewell Hajj. And this was a time where he could spend time with the Muslims before he departed this world. And thousands upon thousands of Muslims went for Hajj that year.
Rasulullah says to Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra that he was aware that his demise was close because every year Jibreel narrated the whole Quran to Rasulullah once. However, this year he had narrated it twice, consequently making him believe that his demise was coming close, and therefore on this Hajj he answered everybody's questions as much as he could so that they were able to perform the Hajj after his demise.
Again, he mentioned more than one occasion that your faith should not be only while I am alive. Your faith should be something that you think about when you're on your own, when later on there is no Nabi amongst you. Do not be like the people of Bani Israel, who as soon as their Prophet turned away from them, even though he was still alive and there, he went to meet his Lord, for example, like Musa alayhi salam. He went away for a few days, you turn back on your faith. Do not be like that.
And that he advised them how to live, and he enforced the message of brotherhood and peace amongst people. And one of the things that was done was the people who attended the Hajj with Rasulullah made very detailed notes of how, because he said that it was his last Hajj and he was about to leave, they made detailed account of how to perform the religious duties and the rituals and ceremonies around Hajj.
On his return back from Hajj, Rasulullah was told that he needed to stop at the Ghadir, and those that had gone forward were told that they needed to retreat back, and those that were lagging behind were then caught up.
And it is when the Hajj is finished and as they're about to depart their ways, the people, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands the Prophet. He says, now is the time to reveal. We know that you are afraid of the people's reaction. The Prophet was a brave man. He wasn't afraid that people would attack him in any way. He was afraid of people's reactions.
So the question is, what is it that prompted such a thing? That divine command should be accompanied with this particular clause that Allah is going to protect the Prophet, God is going to protect the Prophet.
Some people may doubt, some people might be jealous, some people might be envious, some people might question. So Allah said, we will protect you from the people's reaction. We will protect you from the enmity. Everybody who hears what you're going to say on that day will be a believer in it.
بلغ ما أنزل إليك من ربك وإن لم تفعل فما بلغت رسالته والله يعصمك من
Prophet or Messenger, convey to the people what has been conveyed to you earlier. For if you do not convey that, you have not conveyed anything relating to the apostleship. That means if that particular message was not conveyed, no act of Rasulullah that he had did was really meaningful in the eyes of Allah.
And so the people were stopped from leaving. They were told, come back, the Prophet wants to speak with you, come back, come back. And lots of people came back around this place called Ghadir Khum, and the Prophet was made a mimbar.
And what he did is he asked one companion to narrate what he was saying loudly so that all the people that were gathered there could hear what he was saying.
Whoever hears what I say, you pass it on to the others. So whoever was present informs the absent. I want no excuses in a way. Everybody should know what happens here.
And the Prophet said to the people, who has a greater right over you? And they said that Allah and His Messenger know better than us. And the Prophet said that Allah is my guardian, and I am the guardian of you, over you. And he takes the hand of Ali, and it says in narration that he lifted the hand of Ali so high that both the whiteness of their arm shows. And he says that, and whoever I am the guardian, and now Ali is also the guardian of these people.
And so whoever was there heard the Prophet's words. And in addition to this, we have the hadith that is often repeated today called Hadith al-Thaqalayn, which means the hadith of the two weighty or the two important things. And the Prophet says basically that I am about to die and leave behind two weighty or important things. And these two weighty things are what will guide you after my death. And these two things will not differ until they come back to me on Judgment Day. So there's no difference between the two. One complements the other. إني تارك فيكم الثقلين كتاب الله وعترتي أهل بيتي ما إن تمسكتم بهما لن تضلوا من بعدي أبدا. I'm leaving behind the two weighty things, the Book of Allah and my family, the Ahl Bayt. If you hold on to them, you will never go astray after me.
Although he had announced that earlier on several occasions, but here the question was of a formal declaration, and it was a formal anointment as of Imam Ali alayhi salam.
And after the Prophet had finished his speech, the Muslims lined up one by one to give the bay'ah to Amir al-Mu'mineen, men and women. And amongst them were some of the famous companions who stood and said, بخن بخن لك يا علي إنك أصبحت مولى كل مؤمن ومؤمنة.
We find that the second Khalif also praised his allegiance to him, saying to him that today you have become the master of the believing women and men. And so in history we see that he has stipulated himself that the leader thereafter, Rasul, would be Amir al-Mu'mineen.
So the Prophet here was informing the Muslims that I am leaving behind you, for you, Ali and Fatima and al-Hasan and al-Husayn. And be careful how you behave with them, because they are my entrustment unto you. I have bequeathed you this. I have given you these precious things to hold on to. When you give somebody a book, you want it to be taken care of. Likewise, when you say, these are my family, you want them to be taken care of and respected and held in high regard.
It was on that occasion that Rasulullah instructed Bilal to recite the adhan, and in that adhan he instructed Bilal to incorporate Ashhadu anna Amir al-Mu'mineen Aliyun Waliyullah.
So this incident shows that the Prophet was planning for his succession, and it cannot be said that the succession happened suddenly and there was no previous plan in position. And so you can imagine that the household of Ali ibn Abi Talib was preparing to be the masters of the nation, preparing for the leadership, preparing to take on the difficult task of managing the affairs of the Muslims.
A few months later, the Prophet began to complain of his illness, and he said that poison that he was given at Khaybar was something which his body was never able to fight off, and he began to complain of headache.
At this time, the companions were very upset, very sad. The women, the wives of the Prophet, and the women from his family were mourning and crying.
And the Prophet began to get weaker by the day, so much so that he struggled to come out of his house for any distance. He struggled to attend the prayers in the masjid on a daily basis, and he began to feel weaker and weaker, feverish. And so he wanted again to complete the settings for the succession. So one of the things that he did was to command an army of the Muslims to leave Medina on an expedition to face the enemies.
One of the most important situations before the Prophet passes away is he asks his companion Osama to take an army to fight the Romans.
Osama, traditions tell us that he was no greater than 20 years old, and we find that the companions had a problem with Osama's leadership of this army because of his age. However, Rasulullah was making the point that merit is not given on age, rather it is given on ability.
Some of the companions said the Prophet has made a mistake. How can he have a young man lead over us, the senior people who have been in battle since when this boy was not even born yet? And so they did not accept his decision lightly. And the Prophet repeated many times that those who do not join the army of Osama are cursed, and I forbid anybody from remaining in Medina.
Rasulullah makes Osama the commander of this army. He ties the flag of commandership to him, and they make their way to a place called Jorf. And it is here that Osama is engaged in setting out the preliminaries of war. However, we find that this army is delayed by 16 days because there are certain companions from amongst the Sahaba of the Prophet that are delaying their entry into this army. And they're using the excuse of Osama's age as a result.
At this point, he asked all the notable companions to go with Osama. In history, it is narrated that one of the reasons that he did this was so that at the time when he does pass away, only Imam Ali is with him, so that then he, Imam Ali, can take the Khalifa and carry it forward.
There will be less people with enmity against Amir al-Mu'mineen. There is less likely to be someone to challenge Amir al-Mu'mineen, even after what was said in Ghadir, even after the commands of the Prophet. There would be less likely an opposition to Amir al-Mu'mineen. And so the Prophet wanted to ensure a smooth succession. And he repeated the saying of join the army of Osama many, many times until he felt that the Muslims were seriously considering disobeying him, some of them.
This is what I have commanded you to do, and you are now not listening to me. It is important to note here that those companions that did not go with Osama were betraying the Prophet's command.
And so a discussion broke out in the house of the Prophet where people were ignoring his commands. He asked them to leave and they would not, and some people sat around waiting to see how the Prophet's health would develop. And so the Prophet heard a commotion between his friends and companions. Some people said the Prophet is falling ill, he's going to die. Some people said no, he will recover. Some people said we must inform the Muslims what is happening. And a discussion, heated discussion, something about the role of Osama as well. And so when the Prophet saw this commotion, he said, let me write for you something, or bring me ink and paper to write for you commands that are very, very clear, unequivocal, so that you will not go astray after this day. I'm going to write something for you so that nobody can say I did not know.
It is here that we find that the second Caliph objects to this by saying that Rasulullah is ill, he is delirious, and that a scribe should not be given to him. And we find that this was objected upon by other companions by saying that no, the command of Rasulullah is that he wants something to write on and you should give it to him.
And there was a commotion between them. Some said, give it to him. Allow him to write what he wants to write, because it is everybody's right to express his last will and testament. Others said, no, the book of God is sufficient, that means Quran is sufficient, and we don't need anything from this man, whom they referred, one of them referred to him as being delirious.
This was a very, very dangerous statement. And the Prophet was hugely offended when he heard some of his close companions saying the words that the Prophet knows not what he says. The Prophet is delirious. And this was a big challenge to the concept of Prophet.
Well, Allah says in the Quran that this is the Prophet. He does not err, nor does he go astray, nor does he speak out of what he desires, but it is a revelation that has been revealed to him. This is what Allah has said about the Prophet. And for somebody to say that now he is raving, that he is majnoon, he's gone crazy.
And that annoyed the Prophet, and he said, there's no point in you being around me, you just leave me alone and go away.
He said, leave my house, get out, and whoever does not join Osama is cursed. Very, very clear statement, and he showed anger on his face. And Abdullah bin Abbas, who was the cousin of the Prophet, says that day was the saddest day of my life. Raziyat al-Khamis, the calamity of Thursday. The Prophet died on a Monday, and this incident occurred 3 or 4 days before. This was the Thursday.
During the illness of Rasulullah, Sayyidah Fatima Zahra stayed by his side, And we find that Medina was engulfed in anxiety over the illness of Rasulullah.
And he realized that the time was coming for him to leave this world. And he told Fatima Salamullah alayha that the time has come for me now to leave this world. And she began to cry. And then he said that he whispered something else in her ear, and she smiled.
We find that Rasul himself, in one moment of time, was engulfed in sadness and was crying to the extent that we are told that his beard is covered in tears. When Sayyidah asks him, for what reason is it that you cry? And he says, I cry for that which is going to befall upon you after my demise. It is as if I hear you crying, Ya Abata, but nobody coming to your assistance.
And then he calls forward Amir al-Mu'mineen and Fatima al-Zahra, and he says, look, I'm going to inform you of the incidences that happen after my life. There is oppression, and not from outsiders. There is oppression from people close to me. There is oppression from this ummah. Oh Ali, you'll be challenged. And he gives Amir al-Mu'mineen a list of tasks to do and a list of things in which Amir al-Mu'mineen must obey the Prophet's commands. And amongst them, he says to him, you'll be challenged and you will have the option of carrying out physical force. There is an option, but do not carry that out. Do not use physical force. If you do, the suffering and the damage to Islam will be greater than if you do not.
And with this, we hear that Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra herself starts to cry, and he says, do not weep. And she says, I do not weep for that will befall on me after your demise. I am crying because of your departure.
Very soon I will leave you, my dear daughter. And I began to cry. But then he said that you will join me very soon. Very soon you will join me in paradise. And that made me happy.
This was a very difficult time for Fatima al-Zahra. Not only was she losing her father, her beloved father, her only parent in this world, she was also losing the messenger of Allah and the revelation from Jibreel and all the glory that came with being the daughter of the Prophet.
He asked for his grandson because he loved his grandson dearly. They came over, and Fatima said that, oh father, these are your sons, these are your children, your grandchildren. Give them something which as a grandfather gives to his grandchildren. And Rasulullah prayed for both of them, and he said, Hassan is like me in case for his personality and his glory and his personality. And Husayn is like me for his courage and generosity.
It is said that she laid on the chest of the Prophet, and he held Fatima and her sons and Imam Ali close, and he says to Allah, he weeping that, oh Allah, this is my progeny, and I leave them in the hands of my ummah.
Fatima al-Zahra was with her father in his last moments, and we hear that there is a knock at the door, and she responds to the caller by saying that my father is ill, please come back at another time.
After a short while there comes another knock, and with this knock the Prophet opens his eyes and he says, oh Fatima, do you know who is at the door? And she says, no, my father.
Oh my beloved daughter, don't turn him away. It's the angel of death which has appeared. And it is the sanctity of your household, of your doorstep, that he is asking for permission to enter. He doesn't ask for permission to enter anyone's house. But it is the sanctity of the threshold of your house that warrants that he should ask permission.
And enters Azrael into the house of the Prophet, and he says, peace and blessings be upon you, Ya Rasulullah. Your Lord has given you an option. We may delay your death today. It doesn't have to happen today. We can delay it for another time. And you stay on this earth for longer. Or today your life ends and you join Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is for you to choose. The dunya today or the akhirah today, for you.
And the Prophet said, I long to meet my Creator. I don't want to stay in this world anymore. I want to return to Him who sent me here, as my task has been done, my work finished.
He says to Imam Ali that Allah has commanded that you place my head on your lap. And Imam Ali places the head of the Prophet on his lap. and he holds his hand under the chin of the Prophet, caressing him. Imam Hassan and Imam Husayn and Fatima Zahra are surrounding the Prophet's body, holding him. The Prophet said to Ali that when my soul is taken away from me, rub my soul in your face to embrace it.
When his soul is being taken from him, Rasulullah's lips starts to vibrate, and so Amir al-Mu'mineen takes his ear closer so that he can hear what it is that Rasulullah wants to say to him. And he says, take care of your salat and look after the weak ones from amongst you. And before he passes away, we hear that he says, Ummati, 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 my nation, my nation, my nation. And with that, we hear that Rasulullah passes away.